Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Music Man podcast. I'm your host, Joe. That's your host, Ken.
That's right.
And we are finally shoveled out of Snowmageddon.
Oh my God, what a mess.
That was an absolute mess.
It's funny because I really do feel badly for the people in southern states like you, and like Texas, and all of those lower 48 that just can't handle this kind of crud.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was a big blast, like a cold blast that even up here in Chicago is like, good God, I'm not going anywhere. Forget this.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's nice to finally. It's like 60 degrees here today, so it's pretty nice to, not have to deal with snow.
yeah,
but it's raining really bad, so it's a trade-off.
Well, it's funny because my someone that I know, they went to Florida. Perfect timing for when the cold weather came into Chicago. And one of the days they had texted me and said, it is an 84-degree temperature difference from where they were in Florida and what we were here in Chicago. And it's funny because I have some college friends that live up in Calgary, and they're posting temperatures of like minus 48, minus 46 degrees. No, you can keep your cold air, Canada. Keep it up there.
Yeah, no kidding.
Push it back.
No,
we love
but
it,
I'm glad we're survived, and I'm glad we're doing this podcast. It's been a while. It's been over a month, which is fine. We've had a lot going on with the holidays.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yep.
But to get started on this episode, we are going to be talking about payola in the music industry. And I'm excited about this.
You seem to know what this stuff is. I didn't do much of my homework, but
that's okay.
Let me ask you a few questions that were totally unprepared, okay?
All right.
Well, what is payola, Joey?
Okay. So first off, payola. It's the practice of bribing someone to use their influence or position to promote a particular product or interest.
Okay.
So does that make sense of like what payola is considered, just base level, like?
So now, is that just like an industry standard or like a colloquial term for the act of bribing to get what you want?
Yeah, it's pretty much, I think in any industry, like payola could exist really. But basically in the music industry, it's pretty prominent in it in terms of at least the history of it, which we do have some facts to back it up. But even in modern music industry, there's aspects of it that a lot of people have been talking about where it's similar to what we would call payola, but it's kind of a gray area because people are like, well, but we could get into that once we kind of go further in.
Yeah. Well, then my next question to that would be, okay, all right, payola sounds like it's pay to play, as you said. Well, who are the people that are doing this? Was this like, does it happen? Who does this? Like, is there a certain section of society? Like, who's in charge here? Come on.
So, as far as who's doing it, it's basically record labels are often at the forefront of payola activities. So how that works is they may pay radio stations, DJs, or other media outlets to promote their artists and songs to gain increased airplay or visibility. Artist management. Artists and their management teams may be directly or indirectly involved in payola arrangements they may seek to boost the visibility of their music through financial incentives to media professionals. So like radios, stations, DJs, that type of thing.
Got it.
Radio stations and DJs have historically been central to payola practices because of terrestrial radio being the way it was. They would, in exchange for payments or other incentives, they may play specific songs more frequently or engage in promotional activities if they're given incentive from an artist or a record label.
Sure.
And that's kind of how that works. So in terms of modern era, or I'm sorry, I got another one before modern era. You have promoters and publicists. And I'm kind of familiar with this one due to the previous band I was in, with the one that was doing a lot of touring and was on the radio and stuff. Promoters and publicists. And this is kind of where we were in with some of it. Promoters and publicists working on behalf of artists or labels may facilitate payola arrangements. They might offer various promotional services or financial incentives to those, promoters or publicists or DJs or whatever. So it's always an exchange of money for getting something out of it. It doesn't matter about the music. And before we keep going, the one thing I want to say is you and I had said, like, we're trying to stay really middle of the road with this. Like,
Sure.
we're not trying to be like extreme one side or extreme the other. We're trying to just provide facts to the like other musical people that are listening to this to understand it better, but to also see like there's a grayscale. Like,
I'd like to add too that
yeah,
yes, we're trying to give as much of an unbiased perspective on the facts, and then of course we can add a little color commentary of our own later on. But I think one of the good cop, bad cop, or devil's advocate parts of this discussion we could have right now is that payola seems to be essentially everybody's just paying people under the table for the upper hand.
Yeah.
I'll pay you $500 if you play my song before Susie Homemaker that isn't paying you anything. It's just basically buying the rights to be in front of the line.
Yes.
The whole devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that the whole devil's advocate part of this is okay. Well, in terms of pushing commodities and advertising, should you expect to pay any kinds of fees in order to promote your product or your act or your art? I think there is definitely, like you said, that gray area where, in some regions, in some aspects, you're going to have to, do something for somebody else in order to, like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think that's where this whole grayscale is in. And a lot of people, and I don't mean to sidetrack because there was a few other things I had to finish with some of that stuff, but
yeah,
a lot of people are sitting there saying, well, it doesn't pick the best talent. It's just whoever has money is being able to like bribe or pay.
Yeah,
so it's like true, but this is getting into like moral and ethical, where we're like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? But before we continue on with this, there's a few other things I wanted to touch on from the first question. So we talked about promoters and publicists, how it works in streaming platforms now, because we're in the modern era. In the digital age, streaming platforms and playlist curators have become influential. Payola may involve payments to or other incentives to secure placement on popular playlists, which would increase visibility. And then the other one to talk about is, where am I? Okay. Record pool members. Record pools are groups of DJs who receive promotional music from record labels, and payola can occur when these DJs are incentivized to play specific tracks through financial arrangements. there's other ones, but we can kind of move forward with this because we're all getting the idea of like how this all is processing and how this works.
Yeah. What's the actual practice?
What was
I
that?
mean, that kind of brings me. It's like, yeah, we're talking mostly right now about what's the actual practice. Like, what's the
Yes.
like, what is it? What is this? What are they doing? What is it that we don't know about that this industry has been partaking in for decades?
Yes.
Well, that brings me to the next question. Is well, how in the world, like, how is this type of business practice, this sort of, if you don't have the money, you're getting iced out and you don't get any exposure. How is that affecting all of us in the music community?
Sure. So overall, payola disrupts the natural flow of the music industry. It's distorting the relationship between artists, their art, and the audience. It erodes the principles of fairness, transparency, and artistic merit that should ideally guide the industry, if you know what I mean. It undermines fair competition in some aspects. It could create uneven playing field by giving preferential treatment to those who can afford to pay for promotion. It also reduces listeners' trust, which is huge. When listeners discover the songs that they hear are not organically chosen by but influenced by financial incentives, that totally could erode trust.
Yeah,
It could harm independent and lesser known artists, which you and I know, like what we're going through and struggling with. I could keep going too. You could tell me to just shut up because this is like a lot, but this is a lot to where like it discourages innovation.
Yeah, so the point of the question is that it has a massive effect on everyone that's in the industry, everyone that is in the music world. This sort of artificial prescription, like these payola schemes, essentially have a history of curating preferential material for the listeners, not the listener's preference. I think you had said in one of your, one of the points that you made, it like, well, people are not actually listening to these songs, but the radio station they listen to plays the song so many times that it just becomes a part. Oh no, I like it now. It's been on the radio a lot. I like it. Well, that kind of delves into the manipulative quality of marketing any kind of product that there is. You look at any type of advertisement for a company, commercial or a billboard or a print ad. The game is to get it in your face or in your ears as much as possible, to where that becomes a memory or a subconscious cue. So that, let's say your pipes break and all of a sudden, let's call that letter company, since they have that jingle that's on the television every fourth commercial while I watch it at an evening. Like, so this whole payola thing is, to me, it sounds as though it is exactly the same as a type, like they're just using money to market you a product that you may or may not want or may or may not like. That's, I think, the bad side of it, because, like you said, there's no organic, I guess, appreciation. There's no organic choice there.
Yeah.
But again, if you have good material and you're able to pay how much did you guys spend in the band that you were in?
So our manager told me it was over $250,000 over the 2 years we were moving, because we were like 2003 to 2005, and I believe it was $250,000 or more than that, a little bit more than that, where we were paying radio promoters to push our singles on specific radio stations. So basically, how it worked was our manager would give the promoter money. The promoter would then say, "Okay, I have these network connections. I'm going to try to get them on these radio stations."
Yeah.
So it was a form of payola. And whether or not we had good music or not, like without our manager paying for that, we would have never been on the radio.
And you were, right?
Yeah, we were on the radio.
Okay.
We played a few radio shows. We did a bunch of festival stuff, opened up for some bigger bands. But as somebody who now like looks back at it, it's one of those things where it's like it's difficult because I was fortunate to be in that situation where a manager could afford to do that. I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to have my song on a radio otherwise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay, that kind of brings me to the next question is this practice sounds pretty illegal, and I'm fairly certain the Communications Act of 1996?
Yeah.
Federal Communications Act legally, I'm doing air quotes here, legally made payola illegal. What's going on now that it's supposedly illegal? How are these payola people, these illegal channels, still operating, doing the same damn thing, just in a different way?
So that's a good question. Like you said, the FCC did. I think you're right. I think it was in 1996 or whatever. They came out and basically said like this is illegal. Which in 1934 they originally said that there was an act that came out that said you cannot broadcast terrestrial radio, that you cannot pay those things. As far as like how it's being enforced where they're not doing it, it's the same thing like everything kind of in America where like legal jargon can be influenced and weaved in and out.
Loopholes.
But there are some successful prosecutions of this. Just for example, in modern time, we'll go back to 2016. Cumulus Media, a major radio station operator, agreed to pay $540,000 to settle an FCC investigation into payola allegations. They found that Cumulus failed to disclose sponsorship identification information regarding certain programming. So, if they disclose they're getting the money, technically they don't consider it payola, if that makes sense. But you can still
it's so good.
Do that. Is this making sense how they're like getting away around it?
Yes.
And
yes.
just to state this, like everything in America, sometimes the fines aren't as expensive, or like you make more money doing the illegal activity than the penalty is.
Oh, yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep, 100%. How many times have you seen, like, especially politicians or companies? The company's made $9 billion over the course of 10 years, and they were dumping toxic waste. Well, the federal government fines them $10 billion. Okay.
Yes, and so they'll take the penalty. So I'm trying really hard to stay like neutral, because it's hard, But as far as like how they're like, to answer your question, there's still rules and laws, but sometimes it seems like there's two criminal justice systems when it comes to this stuff, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are successful attempts to control, or at least
prevent,
the injustice has happened, and how was it ever righted? Was the wrong ever righted?
Right. And this, I have a few of them too. I don't need to go over all of them, but there's a few of them from the mid 2000s, from like 2005 to 2007, and then there was one from like the 1960s with a. So there are ones where they like went after people for this payola, but it generally seems to be if you disclose it, then technically it's not illegal.
All right. So in this grand story of pay to play, if you got the money, we'll get you on the radio. Um, in regards to how this landscape is evolving, you said that you've tried a number of things listen up, ladies and gentlemen. Joey has a new song. He has a new project that he has put out on all of the streaming websites. It's called Doula Graves. And did you not try some of the little tools and tricks that Spotify and or other advertisement things give you the tools to try and proliferate your music to others? Were you successful?
Yes. First off, thanks for giving me a shout out. I appreciate it. You did not have to do
you're welcome.
that.
I know.
Yeah. You know how like when you release a new single on Spotify, once you're a developed artist, you can pitch it to a playlist, right? Through your Spotify for Artists. So this is different than what I attempted to do. I still did that pitch, but there's a bunch of websites where you can submit to curators and influencers, which again, influencers being social media influencers are now part of the payola, which is I'm going to explain. So I went to I'm gonna dox this company just because there's nothing wrong with it. It does what it says it's gonna do, and it's called Muso Soup, and it's just like Submit Hub or any other one that lets you do like curators submitted playlists where you could submit to a specific curator. So you pay Muso Soup, like I paid $30 for just a one-time release, and it was basically saying like, hey, you're gonna pay us $30. We're gonna promote your song to this list of curators and their playlists. But whatever they decide to charge you to put you on their playlist, that's up to them, and that's extra. So the $30 was only to get my music in front of these curated playlists. So does that make sense to start?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not just playlist curators, they're also social media influencers that may have like 10,000 followers to 100,000 or whatever it is, followers. And same thing for these playlists. There's potential for these playlists to select you, and they have, thousands of followers or, millions of followers. With doing this, I cannot tell you how many of them I've got. I've got 60 offers for my single to be on playlists and social media. If I were to do every single one of them, I would probably have spent $1,000 in just paying these people to do writing reviews of my song or putting a video together for their social media. Or one of them was, and I'm not knocking these people, one of them was doing a makeup tutorial while my song was playing in the background to all their followers. The one thing I realized with this whole thing, and I only spent the $30 because I just wanted to test this out and see how good it really was. This is where it becomes, are you really targeting the right people for your music? Mm-hmm. Are these people actually listening to the song? Which I realized from majority of the playlist, none of these people were actually listening to the song. Because it was like a random playlist with like tons of other genres of music.
Okay.
Also, they were all from foreign countries. Not a single one from the U.S. responded back to me.
Oh.
So,
interesting.
it's a type of payola in a way where I'm paying somebody to review my song, which is fine. They need to make money. But do they really want to hear the song, and do they really want to review it? Does that like
Sure, that's the guise of payment. Like, if you didn't pay me, I wouldn't be giving you the time of day, kind of thing. And I think that brings me to one of the points that's just been swimming around in my head is, as a creative person, you will eventually come up to roadblocks in your career or your journey to share your art or even make money off your art. And I'm sure there are countless stories in many different versions that people all over the world could share, is the question of, why does it seem like I can't get anywhere?
mm-hmm.
Why does it seem like no one wants to listen to it or watch it or buy it or see it? Why is it that just nothing ever happens? It never gets off the ground. Is there so much competition? Is my work not any good? Am I not showing it enough? Am I not playing it enough? This is an instance where even if you had the greatest work ever, if you aren't paying the right people, it's not going to get to anyone. So this sort of learning from you and from other parts of the internet about this payola, it's kind of comforting justification for the feeling of like, why does it feel like I don't exist and I'll never exist in the grander scheme of things? Well, because since the early 60s and 70s, throughout up until 1996, when the FCC passed the Communications Act, why is it that there's only a select few that ever get any attention?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have wonderfully brilliant work, if you're not, there was a system in place that only gave a chance to those who had enough money.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm naive to think that, well, that's just how the world works. But I appreciate that the internet has given us some answers as to why like, it's not like we're stagnant because we're not making good work or we're just not working hard enough. No, it really isn't that. To a degree, like, yeah, not everybody's work is the most monumentally wonderful work in terms of a sales market or like a market, like a universal market. But I mean, everybody's stuff is worth it. Everybody's work is worth it, because it's not just because it's worth it to you, but there's value in the creative process and experience that individuals get. And if you're looking to try and spread it further and maybe turn it into a career, it goes back to what I said a moment ago, that I feel so much better knowing that there's an evil entity that has been preventing me from ever being successful. It's so backwards to even say that, but like, it's better. I feel better knowing than not knowing and thinking, well, I just don't have what it takes, or I just don't got it. Well, it's not that. It doesn't matter what you have if you don't pay the right Goomba.
Yeah, and it, yeah, it's a kick in the nuts.
Yeah,
and I also kind of think of it like, you and I have talked about this before, like networking. Like, there's a benefit to networking, and there's a benefit to getting those connections and contacts and stuff. And majority of the people that like I've known that like quote unquote made it, which it's not a lot of people. It was all just knowing a person through a person through a person.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but it's difficult when your art's not presented as art. It's like you've talked about before, it's a commodity.
Yeah.
And again, I'm trying to like lay in the middle here where just morally and ethically
It's hard.
that's just tricky.
Yeah, I think it's good to mention that I think the the sort of the crossroads of what we're talking about essentially has to do with bringing your art to a if you want to make money, if you want to be in the business, payola has been preventing you from being successful in the business among a myriad of other reasons you're not successful in the music business. The but if as we've always said, like you gotta do your art and music for yourself first.
Yeah.
But this whole payola thing, like, good grief, like it sounds just like American politics.
It does. And so the one thing I will say too about this, there's quite a few bands or artists that I run not personally run into, but that I follow occasionally, who have really blown up because of TikTok. And it's become one of those things where a lot of people are like, oh, they're just a TikTok artist. Like it's kind of like a negative veil. Well, they've been able to curtail around this whole payola because they're making music and they're releasing it on these platforms. And it's starting them a music career without having a record label, without having to pay a radio. You know, people are finding these artists on these social media platforms. But the problem with it is, like you said, it's very saturated. There's a lot of people trying to do it. Everybody wants to try to go viral. So it's become, again, a saturated market of artists and creatives where it's no longer really becoming about the art or the creative idea. It's what can we make go viral so we can make a living off of music so we don't have to do payola or we don't have to, like, we're making all the money. Again, this isn't me bashing one side or the other. It's really coming up with like a moral and ethical idea of like you and I have talked about, like, define what you want with your music, how you want to approach it. Payola exists. There's nothing we can really do about it to change it at this point because money is what matters in society, in our, at least in American culture. But how do you kind of find your back door then? How do you get your music to more people? The last thing I'll say, and I'll shut up and let you talk, is I personally wish when you were going through the distributors to streaming platforms, they allowed you to select bands that you would kind of fit in with in a way. Not saying that you get to pick who you are essentially with as a major artist, but like Doula Graves has a semblance to Queens of the Stone Age or Foo Fighters. I wish that I would be able to select that just because then I would know my target audience would hear that rather than being put on some random playlist that people don't like that type of music. Does that make sense? Like,
so kind of like if there was a better tool within the, I guess, the distribution process that allowed you to target. Maybe there is that tool, but you have to subscribe, have a pro membership to your distribution, and there again, that kind of like payola.
Yeah.
If you want the inside tips or the better tools to better target your audience, well, you need to pay for a member. Oh, payola again. It's payola all over again. Oh, good grief.
I hope this episode didn't frustrate you or anything. And I hope the listeners, it doesn't frustrate them. It's more just to give them insight on, like, this stuff does happen. I've experienced it. I've been a beneficiary of it with my old band, like we talked about. So for me, it's like it's a shitty situation.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast, I guess you could
Huh?
throw at it. It's the nature of the beast, I
Yeah.
guess you can throw at it. Yeah, you know what? We recommend everyone that's listening, that's interested, go look up Payola. Do your own research.
Yeah.
Check into it. There's all kinds of stories, all kinds of information. There's even an interesting video that Rick Beato does. Rick Beato is a YouTuber. He's an incredibly talented
Yeah.
master of his craft. He's an amazing teacher. But boy, oh boy, that guy, he's got some insights on Payola
His
that are like,
knowledge.
what? So go investigate. Go look. Go check in on these things for yourself. And in the meantime, keep making your art. Keep making your music. Keep being creative and just freaking be clever. You know, how many people have... I know Instagram, for me, is an amazing tool for sharing my music. And there's countless artists that I follow that I only really know of because of their presence on Instagram, because of how they're using it as a tool of exposure for them. So get creative, man. Get, clever, and just keep doing it. Keep sharing it. Keep making it. Payola and roadblocks like this are always going to exist, and it's going to be a pain in the ass to get around the next version of it. But if you just keep chugging away and loving what you do, I think it'll come in whatever form it's supposed to come for us and you and you and you and you.
That was really well said, actually, and I have nothing to add to that.
All right, then. Well, done. We're done. That's it.
We're done.
Finished.
Well, then, with that, we want to thank you all for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel on YouTube. We've gotten a few more subscribers, which is really cool. And also leave comments. If you don't like us, if you like us, you can leave comments. It's okay. We would love to hear feedback. But other than that, we thank you for coming back every week or every time we post something. And
yeah, thank you for listening.
All right. Well, we will see you next time on the Music Man Podcast.
Peace out.